Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my weekly reading of my book, Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family. I'm Rosalinda Román. I go by Rosalinda, and I wrote this book. It's a sailing memoir about our family's adventures living on two different boats, Hakuna Matata and the Dawn Treader, which you can see on the back of the book. Anyway, so I thought just would start sharing the book with people, and we're doing it chapter by chapter every Tuesday here on this live stream. If you're new here, I just have a little housekeeping to share with you. If you're watching live, you can actually put a note in the platform that you're watching it on, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, and I will get that note, that comment in the studio. Now, when I'm reading, I won't do anything with it, but if I notice it at the end, I might pop up that comment. So if you like these live streams, feel free to send a note. All right. And also one more thing before I go, I am also putting the audio of these recordings and the text of the book on my Substack. That's a brand new thing I just launched, where I'm sharing some of my writing. And one of the things I'm sharing is the chapters of this book. So if you want to see it in written form, you can do it that way, or you can just buy the book. There's links in the show notes. All right. I got to tell you, I'm so loving this. It's so good for me. It keeps me accountable. It helps me show up every week. And it helps me remember the things that I need. Like one week I forgot to bring my book. The next week I forgot to bring my glasses, so I couldn't actually read it. And I think this week I've got everything I need. So without further ado, here we go. This is Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family, Chapter 5, Holidays on Board. As I look around our rental house in Round Rock, Texas, I see a Halloween graveyard. There is the 3-foot spider lying on his back on the floor in front of me. There are candy wrappers strewn about and tucked into various nooks and crannies. This, despite my constant threats that for every wrapper I find lying around this house, I get to eat one of your Halloween candies. Apparently, candy-crazed kids' brains cannot process logic and reason. That, or they're counting on the fact that mommy's on Weight Watchers right now, and there is little chance I'll follow through on those threats and risk blowing my diet. Sneaky little monsters, these ones. Speaking of monsters, there is also a monster mash going on beside me. Sully and Mike Wazowski sit in a massive pile of costumes, along with the Mad Hatter, Alice of Wonderland, Buzz Lightyear, Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, Batman, Gru and his minions, and the entire Incredibles family. The friendly ghosts and smiling pumpkin lights are still hanging outside. It is the morning after Halloween, which, if you ask me, should always be a national day off from work and school. Instead, on this Thursday morning, I did what I do every weekday since we moved to this neighborhood. I got Samuel in his roller skates, Nala in her harness, and we skated and jogged the 1.25 miles to his school. We are definitely not on a sailboat on a remote island anymore. On this, my favorite holiday, I have to admit it has been better being off the boat in many ways. That is something I thought I would never say just a few months ago. But living on land in a neighborhood with a car means that everything is easier. It means that everything we could need to create any costume or effect we envision is just a quick drive away. This allowed us to get really creative this year. After much debate about what we would be as a family, trying to top our previous year's Incredibles family, we went with a theme Ziva came up with: animated movies. Instead of just picking one favorite character, we created costumes to represent the entire movie. For example, Ziva was Alice in Wonderland, plus the Mad Hatter, plus the Cheshire Cat, and the Queen of Hearts, all rolled into one. If you ask me, the effect was magical, and we had a blast showing off these creative costumes around town and trick-or-treating around the neighborhood. This is what it's like to do a holiday on land in the land of plenty. That is not to say that holidays on the boat can't be just as magical. They just require a very different kind of creativity in order to make that magic happen: creative planning. For one thing, there is limited space, so the mountains of monsters would have nowhere to live on a boat. For another, the odds of finding the perfect pieces to complete your costume ensemble are very low on tiny tropical islands. It is possible, if you know you are going to be in a particular harbor for a few weeks leading up to a holiday, that you could order things to be delivered, but this is ridiculously expensive, and most cruisers don't find that to be a viable option. Instead, you either bring it with you before you leave the mainland, or you do without. This is a reality I learned for our first Halloween on a boat. We had moved aboard Hakuna Matata in September 2009. Ahava and Ziva were 4 and 2, respectively, and Samuel wasn't even a blip on the radar yet. The girls may have been young, but Halloween was already a big deal in their books. As we made our provisioning runs to prepare for a late October crossing from West Palm Beach, Florida to the Bahamas, Halloween displays were prominent in every Walmart, Target, and grocery store. We were so new to cruising that I had no idea what to expect once we got to the Bahamas, and I really had no clue about how much or how little I should bring with us. Would there be grocery stores or farmers markets to buy a pumpkin? Would there be any way to get supplies for costumes? The reality was that it took most of our energy just to figure out how to read the weather, what most of the boat systems were and how they worked, and which route we would likely be taking for the crossing. Trying to figure all that out while still taking care of 2 kids and leaving space for the emotional side of the voyage wasn't easy, but was definitely a critical part of the equation. Gratefully, we recruited a wonderful babysitter, Miss Melissa, to help us while we prepped and to join us for the first month and a half of our voyage. I knew the girls would be heartbroken if I didn't find a way to celebrate Halloween. So along with the staples like boxed milk, powdered milk, flour, sugar, and cereal, Miss Melissa and I bought caramel apple making kits, orange and black construction paper, princess costumes, bags of Halloween candy, a pumpkin, and even a Spock costume for Nathan. We also brought what I thought was a small turkey for Thanksgiving, which actually turned out to be a very large chicken and is now part of a favorite holiday story on a delightful Bahamian island. But before we could get to the Bahamas for any kind of holiday, we first had to do something none of us had ever done before: sail from Florida to the Bahamas in the Atlantic Ocean overnight. When you prepare to make a big crossing like the one from Florida to the Bahamas, there are already so many things to think about. When you do it with kids on board, that list multiplies. You try to come up with a plan to make things work for everyone on board, but in the end, a lot of it is not really up to you to decide. After a month and a half of preps of sailing up and down the east coast of Florida, we were eagerly awaiting the perfect weather window to make the crossing. Knowing Halloween was fast approaching, I told Captain Nathan that I would either like to stay in West Palm Beach so the kids could go trick-or-treating in a real neighborhood, or I would like to get to a more populated island where there would be also trick-or-treating. Looking over our charts and taking the advice of cruisers who had come before us, we decided that we would sail to the... I'm going to start that again. And I'm also going to practice my little habit. This is something I'll teach you because right now there's only one of you watching. So when you're recording live like this, and you're going to repurpose this video, one of the things that's really important for the editor later is you make a very distinctive separation between your mess up and what you want to edit in next. So what I like to do is I say, here we go, in 3, 2, 1. And now I lost my place. That's hilarious. Oh, luckily, I'm the editor, so it's okay. Here we go. Looking over our charts and taking the advice of cruisers who had come before us, we decided that we would sail to the Abacos in the northwestern Bahamas. That should be the northeastern Bahamas, and get to a town called Marsh Harbor in time for Halloween. As is usually the case when you live on a boat, Mother Nature had other plans. The weather window we were waiting for took a lot longer to open up than we had hoped for. 9 years later, now that we have several of these Florida Bahamas crossings under our belts, I realize it went exactly the way it always does. You get everything ready, you have all your best laid plans before you, thinking you will leave by a certain date, and then you wait and wait and wait some more. Then, just as you are getting comfortable with the idea that you will probably be staying where you are for a while, a weather window opens up suddenly, and you have to sail that very night when you are no longer feeling ready. So it was the first time we went past Peanut Island, out the Lake Worth Inlet, into the inky black Atlantic Ocean toward the Bahamas. It was around 10 p.m. on October 29th. And I still clung to the illusion that we would make it there being anywhere with kids and trick-or-treating, by Halloween night. To say I was a bit clueless and overly optimistic is an understatement. We did make the crossing successfully that night, and we landed at Memory Rock, literally a rock at the western edge of the Little Bahama Bank, at 3:03 on October 30th. Okay. Hey, so Margarita Vasquez just told me that there's no audio. Can someone else confirm that that is true? Does anyone else have audio? Because it's really silly for me to continue if there's no audio. Let me check my mics. If somebody else is here and hearing me, please let me know. Test 1, 2, 3. I wonder what's going on. Test. All right, let me text someone and see if there's no audio. Because that would be not good. So Margarita says there's no sound. Is that true? Can you write a comment if you can't hear me? Shoot. Oh, now you hear sound? Yes? Well, that's what I get for saying I had everything figured out for this live shot. Okay. I'm just going to keep talking because I am going to use the audio, which I believe is recording on my device. So, oh, you do hear me. Okay, awesome. All right, so here we go. We did make the crossing successfully that night, and we landed at Memory Rock, literally a rock at the western edge of the Little Bahama Bank at 3:03 a.m. on October 30th. The three grown-ups were exhausted from our 3-hour night watch rotations and the stresses of crossing the ocean in a little boat for the very first time. As much as I wanted to just keep going so that we could make it to civilization before Halloween, I knew that safety always comes first above all else. So we motored to a nearby tiny uninhabited island called Little Sail Key and dropped anchor for the night. It was the night before Halloween, and I was slowly resigning myself to the fact that my picture-perfect vision of Halloween would not come to pass. Instead, there at Little Sail Key, Miss Melissa and I went to work on creating an alternative Halloween with a heavy emphasis on creativity. As we rocked back and forth in the relative shelter of that island, we carved one pumpkin, dipped a dozen caramel apples, and made construction paper ghosts, jack-o'-lanterns, and decorative links. It was so quiet and so lovely, and my girls, Miss Melissa, Nathan, and I all remember it fondly to this day. Halloween morning, we awoke bright and early and pulled up anchor just as the sun was rising. When the girls woke up, we were already underway, across the Little Bahama Bank to Spanish Key, where we were going to officially check in to the Bahamas. They quickly changed into their costumes. Ahava was Snow White and Ziva was a fairy princess, and ran around the deck while we worked out our route and discussed the day's plan. Believe it or not, I still thought we might be able to take the girls trick-or-treating on some island, perhaps Green Turtle Key. In my mind, I figured it wouldn't be unreasonable to check in at Spanish Key, then sail the rest of the way to Green Turtle Key, an island which we had never been to in our lives, somehow figure out where to anchor, dinghy to shore, and magically figure out where the houses and the trick-or-treaters would be. Did I mention how clueless and optimistic I was back then? Amazingly, some of my plan did work out. We did make it to Spanish Key, where we did check in, but that was the only part of that Halloween that turned out the way I envisioned it. Checking into the Bahamas is always an interesting experience, and if you ask 5 different cruisers, you will get 5 different descriptions about how it went with checking in. Most people who come to the Bahamas arrive by cruise ship or airplane to one of the bigger cities like Nassau or Freeport, where they have customs officials on hand ready to process your paperwork. Coming in by a private boat is a different matter. The options then are to arrive in one of the major ports or visit one of the smaller out islands. For us, it was an easy decision since we were in search of connections to both Mother Nature and to local Bahamians, and not looking for a casino or other typical tourist trap. Generally, you can find some of the nicest people in the world on these tiny islands, and it is really nice to be greeted with a smile along with the warm Bahamian sun. This particular Halloween day, we found just that in the customs officer at Spanish Key. When we arrived at Spanish Key, we pulled Hakuna Matata up to the weather-worn dock, tossed the dock hand our lines, and spent a few minutes securing ropes on the cleats. Then we escorted our ferry and princess off their royal vessel onto Bahamian soil, or sand really, for the very first time. As they ran joyously up and down the dock, waving magic wands and flapping fairy wings, I was quite the nervous Nellie, trying to allow them their freedom while also trying to keep them from falling into the water below. My nerves were not helped any by the shark that we saw swimming below the dock. Miss Melissa just happened to be a newly graduated marine biologist, taking a quick break between her bachelor's and master's degrees, and she quickly reassured me that it was just a nurse shark and relatively harmless. But in my mind, it might as well have been the killer shark from the Jaws movie swimming below us, waiting to strike. Needless to say, I kept the girls close while Nathan went in search of information about the check-in process. After some time, he found someone who said we would have to wait for the customs officer to arrive from a nearby island. They asked us to go back to the boat and await her arrival. That waiting was especially stressful, not only because I was eager to find some small slice of civilization for trick-or-treating that night, but because we had both a German Shepherd and a gun on board, and we weren't sure how that would go over with the customs officer when they arrived. Yes, we already had to fill out a lot of extra paperwork to bring Tova with us, but I worried it wasn't going to be enough to satisfy the animal import requirements. In the end, the dog was only a small issue, as the customs lady was afraid of her, and we had to lock Tova in a room while the woman came aboard to look around and make sure we had counted every last bullet we had on board and registered our gun, our dog, and our vessel properly. By the time we got through all of this, I knew there was no way we were getting anywhere for trick-or-treating. That meant it was time to move on to Floating Halloween Plan B. After we finished with customs and had our Bahamian cruiser's permit, animal import license, and gun registration in hand, we left the dock and started heading south in the general direction of Green Turtle Key. There was an outside chance, if we pushed hard all day, that we could have made it by nightfall. But Nathan rightfully pointed out that it would be a shame to rush through this part of the journey and miss some of the tiny islands along the way. So we chose the closest island, Powell Key, and headed in that direction. In my heart, I still held out hope that there would be a tiny community with a tiny Halloween celebration there, but it turned out to be completely uninhabited. As we approached the area that the charts suggested as the best anchorage, we were greeted by a stunning late afternoon rainbow. We dropped anchor without another soul in sight and got to work on creating our first cruiser's holiday. The girls quickly excused themselves to their room to get ready because they were big and wanted to do it themselves. For the grown-ups, the first order of business was finding something for Miss Melissa and me to wear, because somehow in all the hustle and bustle of the departure preps, we never got any costumes for ourselves. We raided our closets, but there wasn't a lot in there that we could use. Finally, we settled on a native princess for me and a hippie chick for her, using a few of my dresses and some makeup. Definitely not up to my usual costuming standards, but they would have to do. Nathan got into his Captain Spock costume. We filled 3 bowls with candy and headed up to the deck. Up top, you couldn't see a thing. The night was darker than pitch. Perfect to set the mood for a little Halloween fun. We each took up positions on a corner of the deck. I was starboard aft, the back of the boat. Melissa was port aft, and Nathan was on the portside bow seat on the front of the boat. We called the girls to come up on deck and told them to bring their bags for trick-or-treating. They were giddy with excitement, and it was infectious. Starting in my corner of the boat, the girls held out their candy bags and exclaimed in their squeaky 2- and 4-year-old voices, "Twick-o-tweet!" Expressing admiration for their costumes, especially their self-applied makeup, I put some candy in their bags and then escorted them to Miss Melissa's corner. Melissa added some candy to their bags, and then I started walking them to the forward deck while she was sneaking behind us to take position on the starboard bow seat so the girls could maximize their candy collection. Throughout this trick-or-treating adventure, our dog Tova was walking beside them, excited yet cautious as the boat rocked back and forth at the anchorage. She did not like to swim and had no interest in going overboard in the dark of night. I think this focusing on her own steps instead of what was ahead of her is the reason she was startled unexpectedly. When our trick-or-treating party arrived to the forward deck, Tova started barking like crazy, and the girls started backing away. Ziva even began to cry. Apparently, they all thought there was a strange man on board and had no interest in approaching him. Of course, it was just Nathan in his Spock costume, which everyone figured out pretty quickly, but not before we all got a funny story to tell at the next cruisers gathering. With the trick-or-treating over, we went inside to make caramel apples. This was not as easy as you might think because stoves on boats are very small. But we were able to dip the apples in a tiny pot full of gooey caramel to make 8 delicious caramel apples and bring the most unique Halloween we've ever had to a sweet end. Back here in our Texas rental home 9 years later, I'm reminded of these precious moments in our early days as cruisers on a regular basis. Thanks to Facebook memories that pop up on my news feed and Google Photos automatic creations feature, which compares photos from then and now. I don't know if the catch in my throat and the mist in my eyes is just from remembering how little they were and missing that, or if it is from missing the live-aboard life and the feeling of wonder over what we might discover at the next anchorage we sail to. Probably a bit of both. But that doesn't mean I'm pining for the past. I loved those little ones and admit that I do have the need to smell a baby's head every now and then to just soothe my maternal cravings. But I am not the kind of person who lives in the past. I do not ever say, I wish they were still little, because I believe that would mean I was missing the magical moments that are right in front of me, right here, right now, just waiting for me to see them. Would I go live on another boat with my family again? Absolutely. But for now, I'm doing my best to enjoy the unexpected treasures that come from being in this neighborhood with these fascinating characters. For now, I will celebrate holidays like Halloween with joy and make the most of the ease with which we can create the magic, at least until the time comes when I can once again lose sight of the shore. And that is chapter 5 of Losing Sight of the Shore, Holidays on Board. I thought that was very appropriate to read today. I mean, I'm reading them in order, so it doesn't really matter, but it was perfect because tomorrow is Valentine's Day at the time of this recording. So I hope you all have an amazing Valentine's Day. I hope you're enjoying these live streams. I would love some feedback. I'm going to keep reading. The book has like 32 chapters. So if you want to subscribe and get the updates, so each week you get to follow it, that's awesome. Otherwise, I hope you'll listen to it on the replay, maybe when you're working around the house and you want something to listen to. I would appreciate it. I'd love the feedback. Even as I'm reading this, I'm catching some of the errors that I have written in the book. So this will be my first edition. I'm writing all kinds of notes in it. So eventually I'll update that. So if you catch anything and you do have a copy of the book and you catch anything that needs to be updated, please do send that my way. You can always just put it in the comments or send me a DM. And that's about it for now. I am focusing a lot of energy right now on building a really cool community called Untethered Adventurers Club. And I'm also working on my Substack. All of that is in the notes, in the show notes for this episode. All right, I'll see you again next Tuesday, same time, same place. And thank you for being here. I'm Rosa Román. Bye.